What if I told you that a single military strike in the Middle East just sparked a chain reaction that was so massive, it's shaking the job market in Texas? That as Israeli forces dropped precision missiles on Iran's most powerful intelligence commanders, a wave of self-deportations quietly began across the U.S. And then something shocking happened. Wages went up. Illegal labor went down, and American citizens started getting paid what they're actually worth. Now, you didn't hear that on CNN, guys, but we're going to go ahead and expose the full story here. But also, because of what started as a targeted strike on 4 senior Iranian officials, it has actually turned into a nationwide labor shift right here in America. And it all happened faster than anyone predicted. From Tel Aviv to Texas, the war that was supposed to stay overseas, it just came home, guys. And the media, they're scrambling to cover it up, spinning it as a labor crisis. But as President Donald Trump saw this thing coming, he backed Israel. He rebuilt border enforcement. And now, with his immigration policies back in full swing, the aftershocks are being felt on job sites, in paychecks, and across every blue-collar town in this country. So, of course, we need to really break down today what really happened the night Iran's top spies were taken out, why millions are now fleeing the United States workforce without being forced, and how President Trump's return and Israel's strike are reshaping the American economy in ways that no expert saw coming. By the way, if you guys appreciate the daily news updates, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We do appreciate your support. So in a precision military operation, Israeli forces eliminated 4 of Iran's most senior intelligence officials, including the head of the IRGC's intelligence division and his deputy. Now, this wasn't some random attack. This was surgical. We have multiple reports confirming that the Quds Force headquarters was a primary target. In fact, Israel didn't just hit military bases. They decapitated Iran's intelligence command, crippling its ability to coordinate missile operations and regional terror networks. And they did it before Iran could even escalate further toward a nuclear threat. Israel made it clear. This wasn't about defense. It was about prevention, regime disruption, and it was wildly effective. But then, of course, came the backlash. Just hours later, Iran responded with fury over 60 ballistic missiles fired into central and northern Israel. And despite the Iron Dome's legendary defenses and their best efforts, some got through. One missile hit just blocks away from the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv. The building took minor damage, but the surrounding area got wrecked. 8 people were taken out, 74 were wounded, and entire apartment buildings reduced to rubble. First responders pulled children and elderly from collapsed homes. Street cafes turned into crater war zones. And yet, amid the smoke, one thing became clear. This wasn't strength from Iran. It was desperation. In fact, I want to break down that specific desperation and what it exposed and how it exposed Iran's true weakness and why President Trump's response made everything shift all over again. Because what happened next wasn't about missiles. It was about economics, border control, and a U.S. labor shock that no one predicted. The missiles flew. Like, there's no argument there, right? But what no one's really talking about here is how the mask just fell off. Iran's long-feared military might, exposed as a hollow shell. And you might be wondering how. Well, let's walk through this here, right? Right after Israel's effectively eliminated 4 of Iran's most senior intelligence commanders, including the IRGC's top spy and his deputy, Tehran panicked. They unleashed wave after wave of ballistic missiles, hoping to prove to the world that they still had power. But the truth is, they were firing blind. According to high-level Israeli intel, 1/3 of Iran's missile launch positions had already been wiped out in the opening hours of the counterstrike. Now, that's not just a tactical loss. This is clearly a strategic paralysis. And what do cornered regimes do? Well, of course, they lash out. They didn't hit military targets. They didn't strike back with precision. They fired wildly, panicking, slamming residential neighborhoods, cafes, and civilian housing blocks. Even the U.S. Embassy branch in Tel Aviv caught damage. Not a direct hit, but close enough to make it very clear Iran had no control anymore. And while legacy media tried to spin this as escalation, the reality was far more humiliating for Tehran. They were exposed, disorganized, and desperate. No Iranian generals held press conferences, no coordinated response from the IRGC, just chaos and silence. Meanwhile, no Israeli soldiers were killed. That's right, not one. It was mostly Israeli civilians paying the price, unfortunately, because Tehran had lost the ability to strike military targets with confidence. And that brings us to the man who saw all of this coming. Now, let's be real, guys. A lot of people have been burned by bad Medicare advice. Maybe you picked the wrong plan. Maybe somebody rushed you into a decision, or maybe you're just paying too much and didn't even know it. I mean, just take Julie from Kansas. She's been there. She said, my local broker scammed me into a plan that cost me more just to see my doctor. Chapter stepped in, helped me review every plan in my area, and now I'm saving $400 a year. Sharon Bertusik, she faced a different nightmare, but still a nightmare in and of itself. She said, I got kicked off of Medicaid. Chapter helped me get into a new Medicare plan with zero premiums, zero medication costs, and my copay dropped from $89 to just $20. Now, if you've been let down before, guys, let Chapter be your assistant here. Chapter is your second chance. No pressure, no sales pitch, just honest people helping you find the best plan for you. And they're totally free. Give our friends at Chapter a call at 909-563-8279 or hit them up on their website at askchapter.org/Ron. You've been through enough. Let Chapter make things right for you, okay? So while Biden would have called for a ceasefire or worse, sent pallets of cash, President Donald J. Trump stood firm. He backed Israel unapologetically and publicly, and he didn't issue some vague statements or some bureaucratic jargon. You know what I was about to say, right? Anyway, he said what was needed to be said. Israel is defending civilization itself. And I couldn't agree more. Like, Israel is defending civilization. But let's be clear, this wasn't only about democracy. This wasn't only about diplomacy. President Trump's administration provided real-time support. Multiple sources confirmed the U.S. was directly involved in intercepting Iranian missiles, assisting with targeting data, and backing Israel's missile defense in the region. But here's what really separates President Trump from every weak-kneed world leader. He didn't go rushing in. He didn't issue threats. He didn't send a blank check. Instead, he deployed a strategy that the left will never understand. Patience with power, as Trump said himself. Sometimes you have to let the fight, you just have to let them fight it out, like until one side folds. And unfortunately, that is the truth sometimes. But guess what, guys? Iran blinked first. But here's where it gets wild. The next ripple in this chain reaction didn't unfold in Israel or Iran. It unfolded here in America. And not in Washington, D.C. or New York. I'm talking about the job sites of Texas, the agricultural fields of Arizona, and the roofing crews in Florida, restaurant kitchens in Chicago. Because after that airstrike, after Trump reaffirmed his strength on the world stage, millions of illegal migrants began to disappear voluntarily. That's right, guys. Self-deportations skyrocketed to the moon. And the reason why is absolutely going to shock you. Now, of course, we're going to dive into the whole stunning numbers that just came out, the fear that's rippling through border communities, and how this single moment sparked in Tel Aviv is now driving a labor transformation right here in America. So do not go anywhere, guys. So while the media was glued to missile maps and embassy updates, something else was happening here. South of our border, fear was spreading like wildfire. Not fear of Israel, not fear of war, fear of Trump. Because when President Trump stood tall with Israel, when he refused to flinch in the face of Iranian retaliation, everyone watching from the shadows knew what was coming next. Border enforcement would be back. ICE would be back. And the days of Biden-era catch and release, those are done. Those days are long over, okay? That single Israeli airstrike, backed unapologetically by Trump, signaled a return to law and order, not just overseas, but here at home. In fact, the reaction was immediate. Customs officials across border states reported a sharp decline in illegal border crossings. But even more shocking, those already here began quietly leaving, packing up, disappearing, without a single agent knocking on their door. But why? Because for the first time in years, the writing was on the wall. Trump was back, and so was enforcement. No more loopholes, no more sanctuary cities getting federal handouts, and no more media cover. For tens of thousands of undocumented migrants, the smartest play wasn't to wait for deportation. It was to self-deport before they got caught in the net. And that trickle, it turned into a flood. Now, according to updated labor data, yes, even from the Washington Post, over 1 million foreign-born workers have exited the U.S. workforce since March. And you know what the media is calling it? They're calling it a labor crisis. They say employers are panicking, that job sites are short-staffed, that this is bad for business. But here is what they're not telling you. Wages are up. For the first time in years, Americans, especially in blue-collar jobs, they're starting to earn what they're worth again. But why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they're no longer being undercut by illegal labor. And guess what? Trump warned about this for years. He said uncontrolled immigration depressed wages. He said America's working class was being robbed. And he also said that the elites were laughing at him. But now we're seeing the proof in the paychecks. Now, this wasn't some abstract policy debate. This was economic warfare. And the American worker just won the first battle thanks to a ripple effect that started with one Israeli airstrike. But I'm just getting started with you guys. I want to go ahead and talk about Texas, where these job sites are changing, employers are adapting, and wages are rising fast. And I want to show you guys how President Trump's strategy is paying off in real time. So if we can zoom in just for a second here, we realize quickly that this is not theory. This is what actually is happening in the real world. And nowhere is this more obvious than right here in the heartland of America, in Texas specifically. From Houston to Lubbock, from Waco to El Paso, employers are waking up to a new reality. The illegal labor pool just dried up. The roofing crews that used to show up half documented, they're gone. The fast food shift full of workers who pay $200 for fake IDs, empty. The under the table labor that dominated agricultural fields vanished. And that sudden vacuum, it forced the system to reset. Here's what happened next. Construction companies started raising wages to attract American citizens. Jobs that were previously paying $12 an hour, they're now offering $17 an hour, and they're still struggling to fill the spots. Not because people don't want to work, but because for the first time in years, Americans have options. Landscaping and home services, long dominated by illegal day labor, are now seeing demand for vetted, tax-paying workers, and wages are reflecting that. In some areas, daily rates jumped by 25% in just a few weeks. Agricultural producers, especially along the border, they have essentially been forced to restructure entirely. So many are now investing in housing and benefits for legal seasonal labor to avoid relying on those who came here illegally. And then, of course, we have to talk about the service industry. We're talking about cities like Dallas, Austin, San Antonio. Restaurants are facing short-term staffing gaps. But guess what's happening? Base pay is rising. Tips are up. Shift bonuses are back. Legal workers, especially younger Americans, are re-entering the workforce. Now, what the media is calling a worker shortage is actually a market correction, a long overdue reckoning with an illegal labor structure that kept American wages artificially suppressed for decades. But here's the truth. This wasn't caused by Congress. It wasn't a Supreme Court ruling. It wasn't some think tank policy paper. It was a ripple effect triggered by a missile strike in Tel Aviv, followed by Trump's return to power, and then executed through the pure force of will and clarity. The chain reaction is economic, it's cultural, and it's national. And it's also proving one thing. When you enforce the law, and you put your own citizens first, the entire country starts to heal. But let's be clear, this is Trump's win, and it's driving the left insane. For years, they called his immigration stance cruel. They said that his deportation efforts were racist. They said self-deportation was a myth. But look around, right? One missile strike, one president with a spine, one return to border enforcement, and all of a sudden, American citizens are winning again. So here's what President Trump restored. Interior enforcement. ICE is no longer sitting in the office waiting for permission. They're active again. Worksite audits. Employers are nervous again, as they should be, really. Fake IDs are no longer enough. Compliance is back. Federal funding cuts to sanctuary jurisdictions. And if you harbor illegal activity, you lose your money, period. And most importantly, Trump brought back the fear of consequences, not through violence, not through mass raids, but through resolve. And that is why we're seeing something we have not seen in over a decade. Illegal workers leaving on their own, job openings being offered to citizens again, wages rising for the forgotten middle class. And if you think about it, it all ties back to President Trump's unwavering stance on two things: support our allies, especially Israel, defend our borders, no exceptions. So what we're witnessing here right now is not just economic policy working, it's actually national restoration, powered by law, order, and unapologetic leadership. But of course, if you turn on the news, you'd never know any of this. The legacy media's spin machine, is just constantly going. We also need to talk about why these rising wages are being painted as a crisis, which they're not, and how the establishment is panicking now that President Trump's chain reaction is exposing their lies. Now, of course, you might think that the media would be celebrating this stuff, right? American workers finally getting raises, illegal labor on the decline without mass raids, families in Texas, Arizona, and Florida earning more than they have in years. But no. CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, they're calling it a labor crisis. That's right, guys. Rising wages, fewer illegal workers, and more legal hiring is apparently a problem to those guys. Here's a real quote from a recent segment on MSNBC. This drop in foreign-born workers is creating dangerous gaps in industries like agriculture and food service. Some economists warn that these changes could damage the recovery. Damaging the recovery? You mean finally paying Americans what they deserve? You see, they don't care that people in rural Texas can now pay their rent. They don't care about young Americans being finally able to get job offers without competing against under-the-table workers, because to them, it's not about workers. It's about control. The corporate donor class, the same people who bankroll half of Washington, D.C., loved the system as it was. Cheap labor, quiet profits, and no questions asked. Trump broke that system. And now the media is doing damage control for the very people who benefited the most from the abuse. So let's go ahead and lay it out clearly, and let's connect the dots that they refuse to connect, shall we? So here's what really happened. Israel takes out 4 top Iranian intelligence leaders in a surprise precision strike. Iran retaliates with ballistic missiles, sparking global tension. Trump steps up immediately, standing by Israel, restoring American strength, and signaling full support for border enforcement. Illegal migrants, fearing a new era of enforcement, they start leaving voluntarily. Wages in Texas, Florida, and across the country, they start to rise. Now, one event triggered another. It's kind of like dominoes. And it basically started with missiles over Tel Aviv, and then it ended with bigger paychecks in middle America. The media wants you to believe that these are completely separate stories, but they're not. The chaos, this really isn't chaos if you think about it. This is really nothing more than cause and effect. This is what leadership looks like. This is America first, foreign policy, creating America first economic results. And President Trump, not Biden, not the Fed, not Congress, is the reason why it's working. And so while the media spins their fairy tales about labor strain, the rest of us see what's really going on. Wages are rising. Illegal labor is shrinking. The American working class is finally getting a seat at the table again. And so there's probably one more question we have to answer, right? Well, what the heck happens next? So now we got to ask the question that the media refuses to touch. What happens when the American labor market finally belongs to Americans again? What happens when the global elite's house of cards built on illegal labor, foreign appeasement, and corporate exploitation starts to collapse? What happens when one Israeli missile strike leads to economic justice in Texas, Florida, Ohio, and beyond? Because that's exactly what we're missing, guys. Israel, they assert its right to exist without apology. Trump reasserts American dominance without compromise. And the ripple effects? Well, they're fixing what the swamp tried to destroy for decades. Now, is Iran done retaliating? Probably not. Will Israel back down? Absolutely not. And what about America? Will Trump fold to global pressure? Probably never. So he's not here to play defense. He's not here to manage decline. He's here to finish the job and restore the American economy from the inside out. From Texas to Tel Aviv, this was never just about war. This was about order. This was about consequences. And this was about setting off a chain reaction that puts Americans first again. So, guys, if you're watching this right now and wondering, is all of this really connected? Let me say this. It really is. All right. And the next time you get your paycheck or you see a job posting that used to be taken or hear a friend finally getting paid what they're worth, you'll know exactly where it all started. The night Trump stood firm, Israel struck back and the system blinked. Now, if you found this video eye-opening, please don't sit on it. Like this video, drop a comment, Tel Aviv to Texas. Just comment that in the comments down below, Tel Aviv to Texas, if you're awake and watching this chain reaction unfold. Also, share this video with somebody who needs to understand what's really going on, because if the media will not share or connect the dots for you, you can be damn sure I will.